All right. Hello, Titans. We're back with another installment of the Titan Table Talks. I'm Cecil Chick. I use pronouns she, her, and hers, and I serve as the Director of Engagement and Learning within the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Programs. This dialogue has been brought to you by, in partnership with the Office of the President, Alumni Engagement, and Government and External Relations. So before we get started, I have a few logistical details for our program and tips to ensure that you're able to engage with our dialogue or with our panelists today. This event is being broadcasted on a Zoom webinar, so your cameras and microphones will be off the entire time. If you would like to engage with our panelists or team behind the scenes, please feel free to use the Q&A function located in the bottom of the menu bar. The event is being recorded and will be uploaded to the DIEP YouTube channel with closed captioning. At the end of our dialogue, you will receive a feedback link to help us improve this program, as well as provide ideas for future events. Today, our panelists will be engaging in a dialogue about resiliency in the Black and African American community with the help of our moderator, Dr. Bobbie Porter. But before we get to that, it is my pleasure to introduce Cal State Fullerton's president, Fran Vergy, who is here to give opening remarks for our program. President Vergy, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Cecil. It's great to be here. It's great to see you. And it's great to be back on campus with the Titan community. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cal State Fullerton's Titan Table Talks. This time it's Resilience in the Black Community, just one of our many university events this year at Cal State Fullerton in honor of Black History Month and connected to our theme this year of resiliency within the pandemic. I'm so honored to be here with you and grateful for all the Titans who have made this event possible, especially Cecil, who you just saw, and Bobbie, and our tremendous team in our Cal State Fullerton Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity programs, our Office of Government and Community Relations, and of course, our team in Alumni Relations. You know, I also, though, want to thank our amazing panelists. We have Darrell Miller here today, a CSU alum out of Cal Poly Pomona and a former major leaguer with the Angels. Darrell splits his time between serving as a deacon of his church and director of MLB's Urban Youth Academy. And I so look forward to hearing what Darrell has to say. And then we have Martha Blanding, who is one of the very first Black tour guides at Disneyland. And that was during her time as a student at Cal State Fullerton. Now she's the company's senior manager of merchandise special events. You know, I read that, senior manager of merchandise special events. And I'm thinking, this is a big job because everything at Disneyland, as far as I'm concerned, must be a special event. Looking forward to hearing from you, Martha. And then William Bryan. You know, I'm proud to have William on this panel. He is a Titan alum that I first met at this event 2 years ago. He attended Cal State Fullerton on a football scholarship. Yes, we had a football team, and he worked to change the face of our campus when he was a student here. I'm so grateful, William, for his continued engagement and his support of our campus and of our students. And finally, I want to thank you, all of you who've tuned in for this discussion today. Thank you all for being here for Titan Table Talks as we discuss this incredibly important aphorism, resilience in the Black community. As many of you know, this past June, more Black Titans earned their bachelor's degree at Cal State Fullerton than in any other year in our history. And more historically underrepresented Titans earned their bachelor's degree and their master's degree than in any other year in our history. As I often say, this kind of success is not by accident. It is by intentional design, meaning we develop many Titan programs focused on upholding and enhancing a welcoming, inclusive, and equitable academic environment for our Black Titans in and around Orange County and for all our students. Now that includes our recent partnership with my friend and huge Titan, Bobbie McDonald, and the Black Chamber of Commerce to create the Racial Equity and Inclusion Framework for all of Orange County, a framework that we've asked Orange County business to embrace throughout Orange County. We're really proud to be partnering with the Black Chamber on that. That includes our recent partnership with the OC Community Foundation to create our Cal State Fullerton Black Student Scholarship Fund. That includes the recent hiring of the most diverse new cohort of tenure-track faculty in our history and our largest group of incoming ethnic studies faculty ever as well. That includes the recent establishment of our Institute for Black Intellectual Innovation, which is a beacon in the CSU for Black intellectual innovation. That includes the recent creation and implementation of Cal State Fullerton's Guiding Principles for Social Justice. That includes the rollout of our Equity Pedagogy module for all our faculty to access tools and professional development to better teach in an inclusive, cross-cultural way in our classrooms. And it also includes the rollout of our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Social Justice development modules, not only for our on-campus Titans, but also for our more than 310,000 alums. And then, of course, it includes our programming, our Male Success Initiative, our Male Youth Empowerment Conference, our African American Resource Center, and our Black Faculty Staff Association. And the list goes on. And while we are right to applaud the faculty and the staff and the partners that create and enhance these and many other initiatives, when it comes to student involvement in these programs, they often applaud and say thank you, but actually it's we who should be declining their praise and reminding them that the gifts they provide to our campus, to our state, to our nation, they're infinitely greater than any investment we could ever make in them. When it comes to Black excellence in our alumni community, it's easy to point that truth out. Their leadership and success throughout our state and our nation are both obvious and pretty omnipresent. And one need look no further than the fact that 2/3 of this panel that we're going to be hearing from today are Titan alums doing tremendous work in and around Orange County, and the other is now an honorary Titan. But it's important to remember that our students don't wait for graduation to lead, to inspire, or to make a difference across the state and the nation. They are already doing that. Case in point, I write just a handful of letters of recommendations each year for select Titan students who truly stand out from the crowd. This year so far, my office and I have submitted a grand total of 2 such letters. And I want to read you a portion of each of those, beginning with a young woman named Camille Sayre, who recently earned her undergraduate degree. What I said about Camille, from serving as a panelist for our African American Resource Centers, Black and Abroad, to performing with her dance ensemble at our Black History Month President's Reception, Camille's leadership and advocacy was integral to the university's efforts to bolster both cultural awareness and student engagement. She also found time to give back to her community, including times with the Orange County Rescue Mission, the Blind Children's Learning Center, community suicide prevention, and a nonprofit focused on the needs of underserved communities in Barcelona while she studied abroad in Spain. The second letter of rec I have written this year is for a recent graduate named Abehi, who is applying to law school and is here. And here's an excerpt from that letter. Abehi's leadership began in her first year as an active member of Cal State Fullerton's Black Student Union. In subsequent years, she served as intercultural awareness representative and communications liaison for the university's Sister Talk organization, a journalist for Tusk magazine, a resident advisor, a student assistant in our Tuffy's Basic Needs Service office, a research assistant in communications law, and an intern for Cal State Fullerton's multimedia platform as an assistant news producer. I could go on, but at this point, as excellent as Camille and Abehi are, they are not anomalies at Cal State Fullerton. And any investment that we make in our Black Titans is returned 100-fold by the traits of courage, excellence, leadership, and yes, resilience that they infuse in our campus and in our communities and in our classrooms. And we can't talk about resilience without considering that both of these students and countless other Titans like them are navigating their ongoing educational journeys during a time in which we as a nation are only beginning to come to terms with the anti-Blackness that exists in our society. From police violence and attacks on peaceful protesters, to an insurrection in our capital, to the virus disproportionately affecting the health of Black and brown communities across our country. All this on top of, quite frankly, the day-to-day adversity that our Black communities face in our nation as they navigate systems of inequity that are literally baked into our nation's DNA. With that in mind, as we celebrate and we point to the success of students like Camille, Ibehi, and the countless other Black Titans who personify today's themes of resilience, we have to remember one simple truth. The trait of resilience should not be a prerequisite to success at Cal State Fullerton. Our Black students and all our students should not have to overcome subterranean systems of oppression and privilege that are so deeply rooted in this country. Instead, we must continuously do more to eradicate these systems and enhance equity for all Titans so that resilience is actually a choice for our students, not a mandatory survival tactic. We can be confident that these tenets of diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice are priorities in our classrooms and communities. And while this may make us feel good, and like we are on the right track, and we are, I want to be very clear about something. There is still so much work to do to reach the day when all our Titans, faculty, staff, students, see themselves in our educators and in our staff, find themselves in our programs, recognize their cultures and histories in our curriculum, and believe in themselves and the actualization of their hopes and dreams. That day comes only when our Black communities are no longer required to be more resilient than the rest of their peers. I truly believe that together we can do that. But it will take more than words. It will take work. It will take intentionality. It will take a commitment to view and review every decision we make through that lens of our principles and guidelines for social justice. And it will not happen overnight. It will require long-term commitment to change. I believe we have that commitment and we can get there. And I'm honored to do this work with you, with everybody on this panel, to share this journey with you as we once again celebrate Black History Month with all of you. But not just this month, that we commit to do this all year long. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everybody that's participating today, and go Titans.
Thank you so much, President Virgie, for those words and for starting and warming us up for a dialogue today. So as I mentioned earlier, our conversation today will be moderated by Dr. Bobbie Porter. Bobbie Porter joined the Titan family in January of 2018 as the inaugural AVP of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Programs. In this role, she works with the campus community to advance the institution's commitment to all aspects of global diversity that are essential to academic success. Bobbie brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to our campus. She comes to us from the Tennessee Board of Regents, serving as the Director of Diversity and Equity Initiatives. She oversaw the system-wide equity and equal opportunity programs and the development and implementation of programming related to diversity, inclusion, and cultural competence. Prior to joining the Tennessee Board of Regents, she served as the Assistant Director or Title IX Coordinator at Tennessee State University, where she successfully established the first Safe Zone program on record at a historically Black college or university. Everybody, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Bobbie Porter. Take it away, Bobbie.
Thank you, Cecil. I appreciate you. Hello, everyone. I hope you are well. I am excited about this month's Table Talk. When we first started doing the Table Talks, I think this is our second year doing them. We weren't sure how the campus would be responsive to them, and we're so appreciative for your continued support. In fact, this is our event that has the highest registration. We have over 200 folks who register for today. So again, thank you so much for being here. So I am not going to spend a whole lot of time being in your way because I know you came here today to hear from our amazing panelists. As Cecil shared, I am Bobbie Porter. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. So thank you again for joining us. I am going to go ahead and get started with introducing our three panelists, or the first of our three panelists. First, we have Darrell Miller, who is a former Major League Baseball player who played for the California Angels. Darrell became a Catholic dean in October 2021, the first African-American ordained to that order in the Diocese of of Orange, excuse me. He splits his time between his duties as a deacon and his day job as MLB's Urban Youth Academy in Compton. There, he coaches young athletes and prepares them for possible careers in baseball. That's incredible. Miller has been working with the Urban Youth Academy since 2005. Thank you so much for being here, Darrell. We also have with us today Martha Blanding, who is a CSUF alum who has many firsts. She has been working at Disneyland in California for 50 years, the first African American believed to reach this service milestone at 50 years. So congratulations, Martha. At 20 years old, Martha was the resort's first African American tour guide to become permanent in her role. She was also the first Black female buyer with the company. Today, she serves as the Senior Manager of Merchandise Special Events with Disney. Thank you and welcome, Martha. And lastly, last but certainly not least, we have with us William Bryan, who is a CSUF alum who is currently a wealth manager for WHB Financial. He is committed to and engaged in moving the needle for positive change to close the wealth gap. Giving back to his alma mater, he is committed to promoting and supporting the CSUF Black Scholarship Program. Please join me in welcoming our panelists today. All right, so I am going to open up our conversation. If you've been to a table talk in the past, you know we keep these fairly conversational. We make sure we leave room for everyone to share their story and reflect on this topic of resilience. So with that, Darrell, I'm going to come to you first. I'm going to go in the order that I gave your intro. So Darrell, I'm going to ask you the first question, then I'm going to move on to Martha, and then lastly, William, and then we'll have a larger dialogue. So Darrell, will you please get us started? I would love for you to share with us how your story shaped how you do your work and engage with the Black community. Or another way of looking at that, how has your own story taught you about the power of resiliency? However you want to approach that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Bobbie. You know, we all have setbacks in life, and I remember vividly just a real quick setback and a little bit about my background. You know, I grew up in Riverside. My dad was in the Air Force, and he really wanted us to use the education or sports to get us to some type of scholarship to go to college, because we were all expected to go to college. My little brother and sister, Reggie Miller, who's a Hall of Famer with the the NBA, and my little sister Cheryl Miller went to USC. They went to UCLA and USC. I'm older, so I ended up going to Cal Poly Pomona, and I played baseball. And by the way, you have a Cal State Fullerton alumni who's my youngest sister, Tammy, who played volleyball at Cal State Fullerton. So we have a lot of great memories, and my wife graduated from Cal State Fullerton as well, and lived right across the street. That being said, there's a lot of Fullerton in me, so I just wanted to let you guys know that. But I think, you know, the biggest thing I wanted to talk about is when things happen that aren't good, in your opinion, it's sometimes an opportunity for something positive to happen that could be really good. And so the first thing for me, at least, was when I got released, and you know, from after playing 5 years in the big leagues with the California Angels, then now they're the LA Angels. It caused a great deal of grief and consternation, and I didn't know what I was going to do next. And the thing that I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do? How is this going to work? You know, I just got married, and we were trying to figure out what I was going to do to make a living. And lo and behold, I signed a contract to go to Japan, and then the California Angels called me and asked me to come back and be their first director of community relations, and the first African American to have that role for a major league team, and obviously California here at right down the street at Anaheim Stadium. So what was a really terrifying and you know, it was very painful to not be able to find a job, at least in America, that I was at least going to go to Japan. But I ended up just taking the job with obviously the California Angels to be their first director. And that led me to a tremendous career now, with going on from being with the Angels to being involved with Major League Baseball, to be able to build these inner city academies throughout the United States. The first one being in Compton. I've been privileged to build another 10. And I would have never had this opportunity if if I hadn't gone through what I went through when I went through it at the right time. It seemed like the stars aligned, if you will, for me to break other barriers. And I think that's the one thing I want all of my younger brothers and sisters to realize, is that a setback is usually a setup for a comeback. And you have to really keep your eyes and ears open and start listening to people that are that you trust. And if things don't go right, the resiliency that we have as African Americans and the creativeness that we have as African Americans, we have to trust in that whatever place we've been moved to is where God wants us to be, and then give it all we got and make sure we continue to learn, outwork everyone that's around you, come early, stay late, and go above and beyond what you're asked to do every single day. And I think that's, to me, the recipe for success is having that ability. And I was lucky, I was lucky. My wife was really supportive and really helped me to get through that difficult time. And I want to give a shout out to Ken Revisa, who's going into the Hall of Fame with Cal State Fullerton. He helped me a tremendous amount as well, as he was really a great guy, a doctor of understanding how to use your mind and visualize what you want to happen. And he was a really, really big help as well. But I credit my wife, because she really kept me in the game, if you will, mentally, so I wouldn't get discouraged. And sometimes we need those people to pick us up, people that we trust and we love, to help us along and to continue to encourage us that we can do it, that we have what it takes. And then once you get to that point, start to believe it, I think that's where that resiliency and that confidence kick in, because now no matter what comes at you, the next thing, there's always going to be something that you have the ability and the trust in, that where you're being led is where you're supposed to go, because we are created with an end in mind. God creates, I believe, every single person here with a mission, and that only our skill set will fulfill. And I've been blessed that that's what's happened to me.
That's incredible. Thank you so much. That support system is so important. I think that's a thing we hear often, is the resiliency of the Black community, but understanding it's not work done alone, but really there's typically that support system holding folks up and helping them to push forward. So thank you so much for sharing that, Darrell. Martha, I'll come to you with really the same questions, and I'll repeat them just so I can sort of help with that. But how has your story shaped how you do your work with and engage with the Black community? Or put another way, or to expand that, what's your own story, or what has your own story taught you about the power of resiliency? So Martha, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
You get excited about talking and you forget that you're on mute. Anyway, thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I'm going to go up and then I'm going to go back a little bit. During the pandemic at Disney, there are a lot of things that have been happening. And personally, I feel that our Black cast members in our leadership roles and in our beginning leadership roles didn't have the opportunity as our allies there. And they were hidden. Now, all of a sudden, they're coming out and they're talking and they're representing and they're expressing themselves. And it's just a beautiful thing. When I first started at Disneyland, the park was 16 years old and there were not a lot of Black people working at Disneyland. And I say this to people kiddingly, that if I wanted to see another Black person, I'd go stand in the mirror, because there was so few of us, but now it's more. When, as a matter of fact, I am a Cal State Fullerton alumni, and I actually got my job at Disneyland at Cal State Fullerton. I had gone a couple of weeks before to Disneyland to apply for a job, and they told me they didn't have a job for me. Then they came out to Cal State Fullerton recruiting, and my best friend told me to go and apply for a job at Disneyland. I did, and I got a job there in one of our conference rooms in our dorms at Cal State Fullerton. And coming from an all-Black community, I'm from South Central Los Angeles. I grew up in Compton in the Watts area. I went to Fremont High and Drew Junior High and Russell Elementary School, right there in the heart of South Central Los Angeles. And then going to Orange County, where I'm not, it's not a lot of Blacks at that time in that area. It was a whole new world for me. Kind of scary because I wasn't used to it. But then it also, starting to work at Disneyland and seeing what the situation was, it wasn't my dream job. I had no desire to work there, but I'm glad I did, because it opened my eyes to say, you know what, we need to do something. And I would tell my sister, I'm there for a reason. And this is my reason, to help bring in more people of color into the park, to help them understand that don't try to tell me about my life. I know about my life, so ask me. You don't know about my life. And the other thing is that we know all about you, but you know nothing about me. Continuing to say those words and to do things to make them understand, and don't stop. I used to tell younger cast members, there are many ways that you can tell a story. There are many ways that you can say no. There are many ways that you can say yes, and you don't always have to be mean when you do it. You can be polite and you can be nice and get your point over. And that's the thing that I chose to do. So I chose to continue to do that and not stop. In high school, my guidance teacher told my mother and I in a conference, that parent conference, student conference that we had, that I should learn how to do things with my hands, because I wasn't making A's all the time and B. I was a BC, I got a couple of D students. And that really, I hate for someone to tell me what I can't do. So not only was my mother upset about it, but I was upset about it also. And then years later, I started working at Disneyland. And then years later, I went into management, and I didn't have the opportunity to go back to him to say, you told me that I could only do things with my hands. You never looked at me as to do something better or to encourage me to do something better, not just with my hands. I did it. I now work for a top company, and I'm doing a good job to continue to do that. I had the opportunity, and 2 years ago, to be in a meeting with 26 people at Disney, and all 26 people in that meeting were Black. And in my 50 years at Disneyland, I have never experienced that. That's why I was there, to help make that goal, to help make that happen. So now when I go in the community and I talk about Disney, many people would say, Black people work at Disneyland? Yes, they do. And now I got 26 other friends that work there also. There are more than 26 now, but it's like, if you want them to come, you got to show that we're there. And I thought that my job was to help to show that we're there. And now the comment now is that I want to work at Disneyland. I want to come there to be you, Martha. I want to do what you did. And it's like, I have opened doors for you. We got to keep those doors open. Don't let them close, because if they're closed, they may not open again. And so I have such a passion about what I've done at Disney and what I've done in the community that I could talk about it forever and ever and ever. And there are other people on this panel that want to talk also, but that's my work, what I've done, and my passion.
Thank you so much. And don't worry, there'll be plenty of questions. Help get out more of that incredible story. Thank you so much. A question I actually jotted down. I can't wait to ask it and hear everyone's response to it. But before we go any deeper into our conversation, William, I'm going to give you the same question. I can't wait to hear your response. How has your story shaped how you do your work and engage with the Black community? Or put another way, or to expand on that, what has your own story taught you about the power of resiliency?
Yeah. Well, first I want to thank you for this opportunity, Ms. Porter and President Virgie, for allowing me to be part of this great, I guess, I want to say tipping point in what's happening in the last couple of years at Cal State Fullerton. Just kind of get into my story. It's so long, it's so big, and I can go all the way back to being a little kid on the south side of Chicago, living in an all-Black community, and being told by the Black kids around there that, hey, you're not dark enough to be Black. And what I did was I learned to retaliate with that with a fight. And I noticed I start getting respected by being able to beat up people. And so here I am in elementary school, and I learned in the Black community to get respect, you had to fight. Moved on, we moved to a southwest suburb outside of Chicago called Schaumburg. And if you know anything about the southwest suburbs outside of Chicago back then, they were all white. And we ended up, me and my two brothers and a couple of my cousins were literally the only Blacks in the whole school district, from high school all the way down to elementary school. We knew each other, we knew everybody, and we were the only Blacks. And, you know, you can imagine that it went from being you're not dark enough to, guess what? I was called the N-word all the time. And again, I ended up getting into a lot of fights. And physically, my mind, resiliency to me at that time as a young elementary school and junior high kid was be able to beat up people, be physically dominant. And as I grew and as I matured and I started playing football, we moved to California. I ended up earning a scholarship to play football at Cal State Fullerton in 1985. And at this time, you know, I know I was there because I could play football. In fact, I had horrible grades. So I didn't even think I was a student. I just thought I was an athlete. And by the way, Darrell, I knew your sister, Tammy, very well. She was a great volleyball player. So I just wanted to say that. And what I learned was as long as I played football and remained physical, it didn't matter how many fights I got into at Cal State Fullerton. My first week at school there, I remember getting called the N-word by another football player. And after I whipped his butt, I was recognized as somebody that's pretty tough. And so the respect continued to grow. Well, I ended up becoming very successful at playing football. I didn't go to school, just being transparent with everybody. And for 4 years, I was a 4-year starter. I started at 17 years old and became a 2-year captain. So obviously I didn't have an attitude problem. I just didn't do school. I just played football. Well, as I matured, I realized that the physicalness that I was applying was a little bit too aggressive, given my size, strength, and everything. So I began to kind of change the way I did things. We found out that at the time, a guy named Tom Metzger was leading a TV station, a white supremacy TV station out of our campus. And he was the Grand Dragon of the KKK. And more importantly, it was well known around there. He was openly recruiting. And as you can imagine, over the years, at the 4 years I was there, many confrontations with the skinheads and the white supremacy groups. But as we matured, we began to start leading protests, numerous protests. And we led a protest finally to President Jewel Plummer Cobb's office, and we demanded that he be remove his TV station from our school. At that moment, we thought we've arrived. We thought this was a tipping point for change and social justice, not just at Fullerton, but across the country. You know, we're thinking this is big because at the time, when you led a protest, you may have had 100, 200 people out there with a megaphone and a couple picket signs, but you didn't really get the word to around the world. Today, you can lead a protest with 100 people, or you can do it with 2 people on social media and you can reach millions. And so what you say and how you say it matters. Now, a lot of the things we did in our protest probably wouldn't be okay to do today, but you know, we did what we had to do. And as I think back, we didn't have role models. We didn't have the Black Interactive Initiative program. We didn't have the Male Success Initiative. We didn't have even a Black Alumni Association. We didn't have the Black Scholarship Program. We didn't have anybody to turn to address what we were going through. We were kind of like left on an island. So resiliency started to change for me, where I realized physically, maybe I could have fought, but it wasn't going to make any change. But once we start picking up picket signs and protesting, it did lead to change. But I also learned that when you when you want to protest something and you really want to make a difference, you have to be willing to give up something in return for that protest. Otherwise, it means nothing. And as I mentioned, I was a 4-year starter. I thought I was going to go to the pro. I didn't go to school. Well, towards the end of my career there, the coaches and I didn't see eye to eye. I was being told that my protesting and getting involved was being too distracting to my ability to play football, and I needed to make a decision. Well, I chose to give up pursuing my football career after I finished at Fullerton. Never got a tryout, and then ended up, my life changed at that moment. At first, I was bitter because that was my life's dream. I thought, what else can I do besides play football? Well, I ended up getting a job at a mailroom in a financial institution in 1989 and began working there. I was studying finance, didn't have a degree at the time, but over time, I began working with a group of folks that was in Brea, California, and I began working with my supervisor and my manager, again, all white, and they believed in me. But they didn't believe in me because of what I could do physically. They believed in me because of what I could do with my mind. And so they convinced me to go back to school. I went back to school, and the rest is history. 23 years later, after being at that financial institution, I went from the mailroom to regional vice president. Along that journey, I began working in philanthropy. I became an endowment foundation specialist. And as the endowment foundation specialist, I was working with over 200 community foundations, was actually overseeing the charitable giving efforts of over $4 billion in giving for those community foundations. And I learned about planned giving and philanthropy. And I started to realize what we need to focus on as a Black community is more than just inclusivity and racial justice. It's economic justice. And so I devoted my life to becoming an advocate for fighting for economic justice, or wealth, closing the wealth gap between Blacks and whites. I did a lot of research on it, which we don't have time to go into today, but I can tell you, I started studying the history of the transatlantic slave trade. And I can tell you this, prior to the transatlantic slave trade that started in the late 1400s, slavery existed. It existed all through time, and we hear that all the time. But the difference was in the 1500s, for the first time, slave trade became the largest commodity, more important than salt, silk, gold, silver, etc. And by the mid-Atlantic mid-passage in the 1700s, slave trade was what created all the wealth in Europe, pretty much. In fact, by the 1800s, 75% of GDP in America by the late 1800s was the result of slave trade. So Blacks have always known how to create wealth. The problem was we didn't know how to own that wealth and grow that wealth and transfer that wealth to the next generation. And so in my work in a financial institution, I started to realize part of the reason we didn't was because there were no Black financial advisors. And if I were to ask this audience of 122 people, how many of them know a Black financial advisor? Very few hands would go up. They probably each count them on one finger. So my thing was, how are we going to close the wealth gap? How are we going to call ourselves equal if we can't do that? And so finally in 2012, I decided to leave corporate financial world and become a financial advisor, put my money where my mouth is. I remember looking at my wife one day, I'm sitting in church, and a pastor goes out and he says, everybody wants to pursue their passion. Everybody wants to follow their dreams. However, when you ask them, why haven't they? A lot of times they say, well, I need a little bit more money. I need a little bit more connections, a little bit more clientele. So finally, I told my wife, I said, he's talking to me, because I had the information, I had the desire and the dream to be a financial advisor. I just needed to step out on faith. That first year I stepped out on faith in 2012, I made $2,000 in that first year. Good thing I had some money saved up, and I continued to pursue it. I originally thought there's no way I'm going to be a successful financial advisor because there are no Black wealth people or Black investors. And in the 90s and early 2000s, there weren't any. So the reality is, if you want to be successful in our industry as a Black man or as a Black woman, you had to get white clients. And so I thought that was going to be the case for me. So I began working in that. And for the first few years, my biggest clients were non-Black. Well, fast forward to today, 90% of my clients are Black. Some of my best clients are Black. And more importantly, I realized there's a huge opportunity, because the Black community and what my passion is about is turning us as consumers into savers, turning savers into investors. And then if I can do what I focus on as a wealth manager now, not a financial advisor, turning investors into philanthropists, which means they're starting to give back. And in those efforts, I actually served as a chairman of the board for the Black College Expos, now known today as National College Resource Foundation. It was started in the year 2000 after affirmative action was abolished, because we needed a way to reach the Black communities to get them to go to these HBCUs back in the different HBCUs. So that program was started. It's 20-something years strong now. So far this year alone, the Black College Expos and National College Resource Foundation have given close to 1,000 scholarships and over $5 million in scholarships just this year alone to HBCU recipients. I also served as the chairman of the board of the Pomona YMCA for many years, Pomona Valley YMCA. And I recently kind of pushed that aside because I started focusing on working with my two youth, my boys. I went back, and that's the reason I went back to school, got my degree in finance in 2002. And I say that because a lot of people say you graduated in 2002, but you played football there in 85. Yes, it was a huge gap. And when I went back as a more mature person, I got straight A's. I was invited back to be a professor for a day and teach a finance class. Nice. Things changed. But then I started to get back involved with the school, and I realized many of the folks that were Black folks that were going to school in the 2000s, 2010, were still experiencing some of the same issues that I experienced in the community when I went there in the 80s. Now, what was different was they weren't related to what was going on campus or within the school itself, but it was the community around it, Fullerton, Brea, Anaheim. And I call those cities out because we are going to get involved and we are going to fight for change in those cities as well. So a couple of years ago, I talked to some of my football buddies, and we don't have a football program no more. And I'm all about legacy. And I'm like, you realize when you guys die, your legacy dies with you. What are you talking about, William? Well, there's no football. No one's engaging in it. Right. So recently I'm getting them all back involved, and I decided to get back involved with Fullerton because I'm all about legacy and philanthropy. And I met President Virgie 2 years ago, as he mentioned. I heard him talk the family love letter during Black History Month, and his passion for change and for making Cal State Fullerton exclusive just resonated with me. Since then, I have devoted myself. I've got off the other boards. I'm getting more involved with the Cal State Fullerton. I'm hoping to encourage all Blacks that have went to Cal State Fullerton to join the Alumni Association. There's powers in numbers, and also to support the Black Initiative programs, and more importantly, the Black Scholarship program. So that's my long introduction. I have so much more to say, but I'll stop there.
No, it's an incredible story, and I felt like you could do a workshop on the wealth management alone. That's incredible. So
I did do one with Netflix last week. So
so come to Cal State Fullerton. We'll get some folks in the room. Thank you so much for that, and thank you to all three of you for sort of giving a richer introduction of yourselves beyond just the questions that we asked, or beyond the bios that I shared earlier. Really helps our attendees have a better grasp at your body of work thus far. And I picked up on a couple of things between all of your stories that I'll open the floor. If you all unmute yourselves, you're welcome to sort of jump in there. So what I would like to go back to first, with all three of your stories, you all shared that you've either been the first or the only, or maybe the first and the only at some point in your life, some point in your career. So with that being said, what advice would you give to any of our attendees on how you remain whole in the conditions where you may be the first or the only in a space? And I open that up to all three of you. Anyone can take it.
I'll start with, and I think that was significant and why I wanted to tell the story of Tom Metzger, even though this is about president, because we all have a story. And when I was going through this back in the 80s, a lot of my buddies, Black, some went to the NFL, they knew what was going on, but they were unwilling to put their opportunities on the line like I was and speak up. And for a while, after leaving Fullerton, there's a black cloud over me, as if, I was just a bad guy and not following the trends. So I look back and I say, okay, I'm the only, or was the only, was because when I was trying to become a wholesaler in the institutional world, I went to the powers to be. Now, it was a large institutional money management company. And I remember it was 2002, and I'm talking to the managers and the folks that were responsible for hiring wholesalers there. And I'm telling them the Jackie Robinson story in 2002. Jackie Robinson was the first, they say, but as we learn the story, he wasn't the greatest or the best African-American baseball player, but he developed the temperament, the ability to bridge the gap, to take the N-word, to be able to not retaliate, to be able to show folks that we're not all one way. And so being the first is important because we stand on the shoulders of those before us, like Martha, like Darrell. And, you know, because of Martha, now I know of a person that works there, Martha, with you, named Britta Wilson Utter. She's one of your vice presidents and over diversity and inclusion. And she's there because of you. So I just say that to say being the first doesn't mean you're the best, doesn't mean you're the only one who did it. It just means that you've told that story, and it's important that we do that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And then I'm going to step into what you just said, William, because I remember being in meetings and being the only one in meetings. And this particular one, it was, they had all the supervisors to talk about grooming. And one of the pictures that the grooming coordinator showed was a picture that was on the front of Life magazine right after the Watts riot. I don't know if many of you remember the one where the guy had the red scarf on his head and he had the tooth missing in the front. And her description of this person is the reason why he's like this is because he wasn't happy with himself. And I'm sitting in this meeting thinking, okay, the woman beside me was my old manager that I reported to, and I no longer reported to. So she grabbed my hand and she said, Martha, calm down. Don't say anything. And I'm sitting there and I am boiling because that's not true. Right. That wasn't true. It had nothing to do with what she said. Right. And so I didn't say anything, but I went to her later on and I explained to her, number one, you need to take that picture out of your selection. Number two, don't talk about things that you don't know what you're talking about. And number three, ask someone. Yeah. You know, and I would have to say, or in a meeting where I'm trying to talk and they overtalk you because you're the only one. So they're not going to pay any attention to you. Oh, wow. That I refuse to sit in those meetings and to be talked over and not to hear my point. And so I kept talking until finally they said, I guess we better listen to her. And it's like, yeah, because I'm not going to stop talking. Right. Don't stop. So I'm there with you. Thank you for what you just said, William. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Darrell, did you want to jump in on that one?
Well, just to say amen, because, you know, when you're the first and there's a lot of responsibility on you, I think you can't say it any better than that. When I was the first, you know, going into the diaconate program in the county of Orange, you can't tell me there's, you know, we kept hearing, my wife and I, that, you know, there aren't that many Black Catholics in Orange County. Well, your leader just talked about one, Bobbie, who runs the Orange County Black Chamber of Commerce, and so Bobbie McDonald. So there are a lot of African-American Catholics. Some have stopped being Catholic because of the things they've faced, but you know, that's not the right answer. And I think the one thing that that's most important is that there's a lot of Jackie Robinsons still today. Yeah. There's a lot of, and you know, I've been working. Our first academy that we were able to build is here in Compton, not far, like Martha was just sharing where she grew up. And we've got like 14 guys to the big leagues out of our area, South Central LA area, which is amazing in a short period of time. And, you know, over 500 young men and women playing baseball and softball, either at the professional level and the high school level, I mean, at the college level. And they're all little Jackie Robinsons in their own little, on their own little team. Where there's only one or two. So this is, you know, and then the way that our world's going in the last 5 years, how we've been turned upside down, you know, the pandemic included, has really, really shown a light on who isn't at the table and what the exclusions are. And I think, and I say this all the time, it seemed like I was very happy President Obama was elected, but I think it made everyone angry. And some of the people that aren't Black or Hispanic were not happy. And I think that's why we have this divide now. And I think you'll see, you'll continue to see that divide. And the one thing we now know, because when you're the first, you have to be quiet. But now we don't have to be quiet anymore.
Yeah.
We can stand up and we can say, listen, we're not going to do this. We're not going to go down this road, because there's a little bit more support. And the last thing I'll say is this, it was important for Martin Luther King to get white people to support the marches and to be there as well. And that's one of the people, one of the things I think we have to really continue to recruit and incorporate, because I think hearing directly from us isn't sometimes welcome, but hearing from someone that may not be our color, who understands the struggle, can be more effective and really valuable as well. So the more that we can continue to recruit and to develop those deep friendships that are lasting, the more, I think, the better we are going to be as a people, because I think it's going to be hard still to do it, just us alone. I think we need help still. I think there's no question about it. So
Agreed.
hope that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. And as the three of you were sharing that response to that question, in terms of being the first or the only, being in those roles, they have more of an impact than you realize sometimes. I know for me, I'm very fortunate that early in my career, I had a boss, someone I reported to directly, who was another one of those folks with a list of being the first or being the only. And every day that I worked with her and I followed her and I watched her, being resilient as the first and the only, it taught me that I could do that and more. So those first, they have such a huge impact. From her, I learned that there was a such thing as a presidential appointment. So then that became on my list of career goals. Like, can I be appointed by the president of the United States to do so? Because I'd seen it done. I knew it was possible. So being that first and that only, or the only, and sometimes both, it really has an impact beyond just the individual, but to those who you may not even be aware of watching you. So thank you for that. Something else that all three of you touched on in your introductions about yourself was about the creativity of Black people, right? It's forced creativity, or it's a part of the Black experience, especially in this country. So I'll open it up to the three of you again, but I'm curious, how have you leveraged creativity? I think you touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to go a little deeper. How have you leveraged creativity throughout your life or throughout your careers, and tapped into it for the good of yourself or perhaps those around you?
Well, to be honest, there's a lot of times you just have to fake it till you make it, and what I mean is you'll accept something, a responsibility, that you may not have all the information, but once you accept it, then you go get the information or get along somebody who can help you get the information so you can pull it off. And I think that's the creativity and the confidence, I think, that a lot of, I want to make sure all my brothers and sisters know that, hey, listen, you may not have all the answers and they're looking for somebody to do something or lead something. Don't say no. Just go, yeah, I'll do this, and then go ahead and figure it out, because you'd be surprised what you can figure out if you say yes. And then whatever you do say yes to, bring that energy and that work ethic to it, because you can figure out a lot of things just by working hard and putting in the hours, even more than you think you're capable of. And I know my brother who's on this, who's talking, he went and started becoming a financial advisor without a degree because he studied finance. He figured it out, and now he got his degree, and now he's, that's kind of sometimes how it goes. Opportunities create themselves, and you have to either be prepared or get prepared as you go, and just say, yes, I can do this, and I'll figure it out, and do it. And you'd be surprised how many doors open if you're that kind of guy or young lady.
Absolutely. It can be terrifying, but definitely worthwhile if you can push through and see it through. Martha or William, same question. I'll open it up if you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah,
But
go ahead,
go
Martha.
ahead. I'm an example of just what Darrell just said, because when I went into the buying office, I didn't go to school to be a buyer. I was going to school to be an elementary school teacher.
Oh, wow.
But this opportunity came up and I thought, okay, take the opportunity or go teach.
Hmm.
And then said, I'm going to take the opportunity, because if it doesn't work, then I can fall back on my teaching learnings and become a elementary school teacher. And so that's exactly what I did. I went and learned something new that I didn't know anything about, and come to find out that I really liked it. And I was able to take that knowledge and share with others to encourage them to possibly go into the same area, or to reach out to an area that they didn't know anything about, that they may end up liking, and try it. So yes, I am an example of going into an area that I didn't know anything about, and I loved it. I was the candy buyer at Disneyland for 9 years.
Wow.
And I bought candy for the whole resort. Christmas time, my home and my office looked like a candy palace. And it was amazing, the things that I learned. And in that area, there were not a lot of Black people in that area. It was a man's world, but I learned a lot, and I'm glad that I did that. I really am. And I encourage the students at Cal State Fullerton and outside of Cal State Fullerton to reach out and to reach into an area that you're not familiar with, and try it. Darrell's right. Try it.
Very nice. William, did you want to jump in there?
Sure. You know, in my world as a financial person, creativity is kind of scary, because, you know, people with wealth don't want you to create with them. You know, they've already created their wealth. They want you to protect it or preserve it, right? So I would say the creativity part is very important for me understanding this fact. I use the word creator as for, you know, creators. We create things as opposed to creativity. And that was why I started with the Black wealth and talked about the slave and the middle passage, because we've always created wealth. We've always created wealth. We not only did we always create wealth, once we were freed in the late 1800s, we hear the terms roaring 20s. But if you really define the roaring 20s, it was the Black Renaissance movement, it was the Harlem movement. All the big Black cities were thriving. And some people call it the roaring 20s, but what happened? We had Devil's Punch Bowl, we had Tulsa, Oklahoma, we had Black Wall Street. I could go on and on and on. In fact, I was almost to tears when I read the number of things that happened in those times to Black folks in the early.
Uh-oh, William, you froze on us. Is it just me?
Yeah, he froze.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully he'll come back, because it looks like he was just getting started there with a powerful.
But you know what? I can talk to that about that
please.
really quick, because what, you know, the unbelievable theft of African-American wealth at that moment in time in the 20s was unconscionable. And for us to really understand what a huge financial impact that had on African-Americans in America, it was unbelievably powerfully destructive of who we were, and led to tremendous losses of lives as well. So, I mean, just flat out stole the money because they saw African-American people thriving. So those are the things that no one reads about and are not in the history books.
Right.
So as we've talked about that as well, you know, there's a lot going on now with the restriction of true history, you know, especially according, if African-Americans are included, or Japanese or Hispanic are included. There's little excerpts, just enough to get a little bit of information, but not all the information. That being said, yeah, I think that's the piece that we have to understand. And I'll end with this. Back in 1968, right before Martin Luther King was shot, and he was talking about he had met. There was a big strike. It was sanitation worker strike. I'm from Memphis. I believe it. I remember it vividly. I was 10 years old, and I remember him talking that night, and he talked about you know, he was glad he didn't sneeze because there was an attempt on his life a couple of years earlier, and if it nicked his aorta, he would have bled to death, you know, suffocated in his own blood. And part of it, he said, thank God I didn't sneeze. And then he talked about the economic viability of Black people in America. He said, we are $30 billion strong in 1968, $30 billion. And if you really look at why he was killed, that was why, because he was asking African Americans, don't buy Wonder Bread. Because they're not gonna, he was saying, we're gonna go to these stores and not those stores. Take your money out of the bank and take it to this bank because they're supporting what we're doing. All these things that when economics were involved is when Martin Luther King had to die. When he started talking about the money that we make as people, as a people. And so that's the piece that we have to understand as African Americans. We have tremendous earning power. We are billionaires as a people, and we have to remember that's what we have to really start supporting each other in those businesses and supporting each other in there are these opportunities that are available to make sure people that look like us have a chance to come from, you know, we have to start grooming people to replace us, you know, people that look like us and make sure they have the skill set and they're ready to rock. So I think that's a really important point, and I'm glad that our brother, although he wasn't able to finish it, he could have done it more eloquently. But I just happened to be going through, and I challenge everyone: look it up. There's a YouTube video. Listen to what he has to say. Dr. Martin Luther King, and it was in February, right before he passed away.
Right. The Poor People's Campaign.
1968.
Right. Oh, and William is back.
Yeah. Believe it or not, we have a really big building, but the internet went down. Maybe I was saying something I shouldn't have been saying. I don't know. But I'm logged back on through my hotspot. Sorry about that, Darrell.
And I think actually, Darrell, you were just wrapping up that last point.
I was trying to pinch it for you.
Right.
I think I popped up, but at least I took a swing or two.
Right. And Darrell, my husband's born and raised in Memphis, born in the Whitehaven area, went to Lauderdale Elementary, and my mother-in-law went to BTW. So I didn't know about the Memphis connection there. So happy to hear that. So I want to, and Martha, you touched on this, and this is again a question to all the panelists, but I want to kind of bring it more up to today. You've been talking about stories of resiliency really throughout your lives and especially throughout your careers. But for all of our attendees in the audience and all of us here, we were all impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm curious, specific to the pandemic and how that has had an impact. So question for all of you, how did the pandemic shift your approach to being able to do your work? So sort of resiliency from that standpoint. How did the pandemic shift or require a shift for you?
I think for me, for now, I'm working at Disney, and I have to say I'm very proud to tell people that I work at Disney, but I also know, you know, many times we as Black people would think 2 or 3 times before we said anything, you know, and you would also think about it because you wanted everybody to feel comfortable. I no longer do that. And it is because of what's been happening. It's like, I'm no different than anybody else. It doesn't matter what color my skin is. I have words to say just like you. Right. So I'm no longer gonna watch what I say to make you feel comfortable. I mean, my intention is not to ever make anyone feel uncomfortable, but I'm gonna say what I wanna say now. And just like you do. And I think that more people are doing that. And then also with the pandemic, our other thing was, I think I mentioned it earlier, when I was going to school and our history books, it said very little about Black history. It said very little about Asian history. It said very little about Hispanic history. But we knew all about the white history. We knew everything about it. We knew all about the white man. Now it's your turn to learn about us. And it's something that you need to go and do. You need to reach out and ask questions, not just about Black Americans, but about others also. And so, and I think that that has helped a lot of Black people to realize we do matter. Everybody matters. I don't care what color you are. I don't want anyone to think that I don't think that nobody matters except for the Black community. But everybody matters. But we need to learn about each other and understand each other.
Absolutely. And I think in there, a distorted understanding about the indigenous people of this country, right? In terms of their history and sort of what's fed to us in the public school system. So I don't want to cut anyone off. I know that we likely have some more responses about sort of, and I framed it just with COVID-19, but we had a racial justice uprising happen in the middle of the stillness of a lockdown. So please do feel free to add to that. But I also want to start incorporating some questions for the audience. So I'll leave that question open for our other panelists if you wanted to add to that. But I have a question here. I think I have a few of them, but this one that I like and it's burning. The three of you have already shared some history in your remarks, and we have a question from the audience asking to recommend a book that would educate us deeper, in a book that has moved you in some way. So, any book recommendations that you would offer our attendees today?
Well, I would say because of what I do for a living with investing, it's emotional. And, you know, we tend to try to think logically, and we use our emotions when we try to become successful investors. But in order to be a successful investor, you got to completely take your emotions out of it. What I mean by that is people want to buy when things feel good, when the economy is doing good. Well, we know for the last few weeks, the stock market's been struggling. We're worried about war with Russia. We're worried about the election outcomes coming up. We're worried about COVID. And so if you go to people now, they think it's not a good time to invest. But this is actually the great time to invest, as opposed to 2 years ago, or right after we had a great stock run after COVID took off. But this book is called The Behavioral Investor. It's by Daniel Crosby. And it helps you understand not only how your emotions work, but it touches on how can so many people believe a lie, why we as humans can believe a lie. Talking about the insurrection on the 6th and all the other things that led up to that. And I kind of use this as an opportunity to answer the last question, Bobbie.
Yes, please.
So as far as COVID, it was interesting how things work. And, you know, Darrell, you know, faith is important, and you could probably do a whole sermon on what faith is all about. But I just say I learned what faith is because something drove me to get back involved with Cal State Fullerton just before COVID. I went to the campus. I got to hear President Vergy speak. Wasn't sure what I was going to do next, but after his message, I got engaged. I heard him say it then, and I heard him say it now. You know, it took us 400 years of oppression to get to where we're at. I'm talking about the wealth gap. So it's going to take us a couple hundred maybe to get out. We're not going to do it overnight. I've always thought we were hitting tipping points. So I get back involved. I think I'm going to get engaged. And next thing you know it, COVID strikes. COVID strikes, shuts us down. We can no longer meet. I was ready to get engaged. So first it was an excuse. And then one of Vergy's assistants, Justin, calls me up and says, William, we want to do a Zoom call. I'm like, what's Zoom? So they put me on Zoom. We start doing Zoom. And I say, I can use this for my clients. Mm-hmm. So it was probably right before George Floyd, right around George Floyd, we did some Zoom work. And I all of a sudden started using that with my clients. I had one of my best years. Right in the midst of COVID, couldn't see people face to face. I opened up more accounts, met more people online. I think they were just fascinated that I was using Zoom, right? You know, so it worked, and that really changed me. Then you fast forward to your second part of your question with George Floyd. That was just a reminder to me that, you know, we always accomplish something and we think we're at a tipping point. But just watching that trial, just watching that happen on national TV, I looked at it as a modern day lynching. And I said, you know what, we still have a long ways to go. And I think Darrell said this as well. We still got a long ways to go. And I just want to remind people that if we want to continue to fight for resiliency and diversity and inclusion all around campus and the world, we have to do two things. One is we have to be very patient, and we have to expand our time horizon. We can't look at things in a short time frame. When I say short, I mean a year. A year from now, we may not even be talking about George Floyd, and that hurts me. But right now, we have to think long-term, and we have to think beyond next week, next month, next year. And I think that's the message I would leave to everybody. And then I just, so I don't know. That's what I'll say.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Martha, well, Darrell, I think you're the one that hasn't responded to the COVID, but also any book recommendations?
There's a few books, but there's one called $40 Million Slaves that really helped me understand, what's really happening. And I think from a sports perspective, and then, I read it right before we opened the academy here in Compton. So, it kind of changed the way we did things. It became more about getting kids the help they need educationally. And I think I just want to say that and then go right to COVID, because I've been talking about this for a long time, and because I've been in the inner cities building these projects for Major League Baseball for a long time. Well, there's a huge gap in the inner cities that goes around computer use and also the technology, the ability to have bandwidth, to be able to use the internet. And so when this pandemic hit, our nation was faced with this reality that we have a lot of African Americans and Hispanics in the inner city that they don't have the ability to get online and to do any kind of work. And schools were closed, so that put us at another distinct disadvantage. Therefore, we had to be very creative in the things we were doing from our academy perspective, and getting our kids and get it to be on Zoom was impossible, or whatever you were going to be, and it's been so bad for the last 10 years. I mean, we'd have students that had to go to, and you've read about this and seen this. You've seen African Americans getting in trouble at Starbucks. That was the only hotspot that we could go to. So, I mean, we're talking about the great thing that happened with this digital divide is that now America is aware that it exists. This divide exists, and they're doing things about it because they have to, because kids couldn't go to school. So now there are more computers available. Now there's more internet in the inner cities available. And there's talk of making internet free throughout in the world, not let alone the United States. So there's people that are moving to eliminate this digital divide altogether. So, I mean, from a COVID perspective, yeah, we had to make adjustments. We had to learn to use Zoom. I was able to build a building in Florida using Zoom.
Oh, wow.
Crazy. So, I mean, who does that? Right. But the whole idea is you can do a lot more than you used to be able to do with using the internet. And I think this pandemic woke a lot of us up. I'll finish with this. I believe, and I pray that I'm wrong in saying this, but I believe the pandemic, we got to see something we would have never seen. Right. And we got to see it a lot. And we had time to see it. We had nowhere to go. Right. The time that this happened, it made us all collectively as a world stop and go, what the heck just happened? Right. And William said it best. We got to see a lynching. And on purpose lynching, and lynchings, as we all know, people would have a picnic to go see a lynching. Yes. I mean, it's the most disgusting thing if you think about it. It's like a crucifixion, and people go eat, So because I wanted to use this opportunity to say this spiritually, like African Americans, we've been the most spiritual people of all time, because we don't have God, we have nothing. Because when you're enslaved, you have no voice, you have nobody to talk to except your creator. You get really tight. And so I think these are great opportunities to get to know God as well. And I'm a believer, obviously. I'm a deacon in the Catholic Church. And I think we have to really understand that these are opportunities for us to also, dig deep and look inside and understand our spirituality, because we have been created with a goal in mind. God creates every single person, and there's none better than another. Regardless of race, creed, and color. And we were created by God, for God, to do what we have a mission on earth that we are here to accomplish. Whether we believe in it in God or not, He's the one driving us. Therefore, it doesn't hurt to make sure you include Him if you have an opportunity to be able to cooperate with what the Holy Spirit wants to do in each and every one of us, because He wants us to make a difference. He knows we have what it takes to make a difference as African Americans. He's built us differently, and He's equipped us differently, and we have what it takes to go to the next level in anything we decide to do. But I suggest we also tap into that spiritual piece that we as African Americans have as well, because it's deep. And it's real, and we have that close relationship with our Maker because we are created in His image as well.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. We actually had a question from the audience, but you touched on it already. So we'll come back around. We have about 12 minutes left. So that was a pretty good response. And the question was around spirituality in sort of these resiliency stories. So I appreciate you touching on that, Darrell. But when I shared this before we opened the doors for our audience, but when we were designing these Titan Table Talks, a big part of this was representation and really bringing in people who were doing incredible work in our surrounding community and beyond, coming back and talking to our campus community about the work, their body of work, how you did it, how you came out on the other side of it, and really just so our students can see themselves in you. So thank you again for being here. So with that being said, and thinking about the importance of representation, specifically for our students, but of course a broader campus-wide audience, I'll share this question for from the audience. What advice would you give to students who are on the precipice of graduation and moving to their first careers? It's a big question. But what advice would you give?
I would say, I've heard I did a table talk with Fullerton last year on this subject about keeping your Black identity. And one of my messages were, we got to understand that every job you have, every owner or business, whatever you work for, it's a culture. It will be a good culture or a bad culture. And whatever culture you have, just because you're Black, that's not a culture. Being Black in America is not a culture. You have South, you have New Yorkers, you have, so you have people of different faiths. So we're not one box. And so our culture is who we are, but that doesn't mean that's what we're being paid to bring to the table. So I'm not saying don't be yourself, but I'm saying you understand the culture before you take the job and be willing to accept that culture regardless. Now, if it's something against your principles, then obviously you don't take the job. But if they tell you to wear a tie, if they tell you to wear a hat, you got to do that. But I say that to say, because when we get into, I want to keep my Black identity. Well, you can't keep your Black identity if that means wearing braids at a restaurant and having your hair be long. You just can't do it, or things like that. So we have to be careful what we mean by keep my culture. And more importantly, I had to learn when I made the transition from playing football to working in corporate America, I had sloppy talk, is what they told me. Reason why they wouldn't promote me at first. I had sloppy talk. And basically it was a nice way of saying I was slang. I talk Black. And one of my friends who played professional football told me, he said, look, William, who's paying you? So what if you feel like you're a sellout by changing your voice or talking differently? They're paying you. You do what you got to do the job properly. And I'll end on this thing. I always teach young kids that the herd mentality is real. And it's been so real that for decades, for hundreds of years, Black communities have followed the herd mentality. If you look around Black communities, or if you look around any community and you look at the successful people, you look in classroom, the successful people, you look at your family, the successful people, they typically don't do what everybody else does. But when you look at the Black communities, we are so obligated to do what everybody else does. We follow the herd. Just imagine there were 1 million buffalo roaming the American plains in the 1800s, 1 million. And by the end of the 1800s, the government pretty much wiped them out. They were trying to destroy the indigenous people here. And by doing so, they started to try to wipe out the main food source, clothing source of the indigenous people. Well, they used buffalo jumps. They would put a fake buffalo skin over one of the young boys and send them running to a cliff. as the buffalo would get close to the cliff, the boy would jump into a little hole and all the buffalo would go over the top. And it's called a buffalo jump or a buffalo kill. Just imagine if one buffalo said, stop following the herd. And we as Black people and as Black communities and as Black students, we have got to stop following the herd and start doing what we think is right. Keep that creativity. And that's all I'll say.
Thank you for that. I think we have some, especially our Gen Z students, who may argue with you about showing up as their authentic selves and reshaping what's thought about being professional. But I hear the point, and I hope that our students in the audience also hear the wisdom. Show up as your authentic self, and don't be afraid to, if that means stepping apart from what others around you, the direction that they may be going. So thank you so much.
Can I close that out? Because I don't want to offend, because I'm not trying to say sell out or step away from your authentic self, but we have to be comfortable at being uncomfortable. And if you're not comfortable at being uncomfortable, you're going to have a tough time living in this world, regardless if it's with other Blacks or other whites. And I say this because I dealt with racism with Blacks that would say I was too light. Yeah. So it's not just necessarily being Black that I'm talking about. It's being who you are, because we come in all shapes and sizes and colors. So you should not be identified with what you wear or what you look like.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to add something. I'm a twin. We're fraternal twins. My sister's skin color is lighter than my skin color. I look like my father and she looks like my mother. And we would get comments from people. They would call her vanilla and call me chocolate, or why are you so dark and she's so light? But you know what? I owned my Blackness. I owned how I look. I also made it clear that I don't have to wear natural to say that I'm Black, you know, and to say that I believe in myself. I do believe in me. So these, and you're right, William, when you said that we have to learn to be uncomfortable. But you know what? We've been uncomfortable for a long time now, because that's the way it has been for us. Okay. So it's time for things to change a little bit. That job that you pick a job that you like. You pick a job that you enjoy going to, because when you do that, that job no longer becomes, I don't want to go to work, I'm tired of doing this. It becomes, and I am an example, because what I do, I love what I do. I love the good part and I love the bad part of it. And and I've had many people tell me it shows when you do your job. When you're putting on an event in the park, it shows that you're enjoying what you're doing. So you pick, and sometimes you don't pick it right away. It takes a little time to get there, but you want to look for something that you're going to enjoy doing. It could be like a hobby for you, and you're making it into a job and you love it. But own it. Own who you are. Be your authentic self. But remember, you don't have to be raggedy. You know, if you need to touch it up a little bit, touch it up. Or if you need, when I was a tour guide, they were wearing naturals, but I was one of the first people that the guests would see. And I knew wearing a natural would turn a lot of people away. I chose not to wear a natural because of that. But I also chose to show my authentic self with my hair like this.
Right.
And let people know that I'm Black and I love it. I love every moment, every minute of it. So.
That's beautiful. And there's beauty in the choice, right? And
yes.
the capacity for choice.
Yes.
So we have 5 minutes left. So Darrell, I'll give the question over to you.
Distinct meanings.
And to close this out before
noun,
we officially close things down today.
An act of selecting or making a decision.
So I did address a little bit of the spiritual piece on purpose, because I've been cheating and looking at the chat a little bit. So if anyone has any more questions about spirituality, please reach out to me. I'm at St. Juliana Falconary Church, and you can reach me there. I'm right across the street from Cal State Fullerton. But that being said, I think there's 2 things I'll say. I want to actually give my brother a little bit of props here, because William, when I was younger, there's 2 things about my speech. I stuttered. I had really bad stutter and still do. And then, so I had to go to speech therapy once a week so I could learn how to talk and not stutter. And then I got teased by other Blacks and say, why do I talk white? So I was like, you know, you can't win for losing. So that led me to believe I had to just be who I am and not worry about it too much. And then what I'm going to say now is really important is when you're graduating, there you have strengths and weaknesses that you may not be aware of. Listen to the people that love you the most.
Right.
They will give you good advice on where you're heading down that road. Because we often run into blind spots thinking differently about ourselves than who we really are. Does that make sense? So don't be afraid to listen. And I was really hard-headed. Like I didn't want to do what I'm doing now. And there must have been 10 people that told me I'd be really good at it. And I didn't want to do it. I wanted to be a GM. I wanted to win championships. I wanted to be blah, 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 blah. And I tell you, I've never been more happy I'm in the hood every day. And I feel like I'm making a difference. I feel like I can preach the gospel of baseball and softball and really love people and hope and make a change person by person. So sometimes you just have to listen a little bit, and God will always be pushing you where he wants you to go, where you were created to go. And so, and it's going to be comfortable, and it may not be the first job. It may be the second job, maybe the third job, but just be open and listen, number one. And number two, pray. Number three, work hard. There's just I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to outwork. Please show up early. Please stay late. Please work at home, doing whatever you need to do, because you will be successful if you work hard. No matter what you choose to do. You'll have a better chance of being successful if you work hard.
Absolutely.
And then you'll find that fit. So that's all I wanted to share. And
thank you. Very well said, and a great way to close out our questions. So thank you so much. It's been an honor to engage with our three panelists. We are right at time, so I'll ask Cecil to come back and close things out for us. Thank you so much, panelists. It's been great being in community.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for joining our Titan Table Talk on resilience in the Black community today. A special thanks to our panelists, our moderator for this dialogue, rooted in kind of this idea of resilience in Black lives, but also this for the empowerment, right, that spoke through in these stories today, being the first and being the only. So thank you, panelists, for being vulnerable and sharing these stories with us. I also want to thank our partners, Alumni Engagement and Government External Relations and the President's Office for helping us bring this panelist to life. We will be hosting our next Titan Table Talk on March 16th at 11:30. So please join us, and the topic will be resiliency of women. Also, don't forget that Social Justice Week is coming up around the corner. It'll be March 14th, so through March 17th. So mark your calendars and check out our communication, the DIP newsletter for upcoming events. Thank you so much for being a part of our conversation, and we hope you will join us next time. Take care, everybody.